The Committee on Education Workforce will come to order. I note that a quorum is present. Without objection, the chair is authorized to call recess at any time. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's hearing. Acting Secretary Sue, I'd like to start by saying you've been a hard witness to schedule. The committee began working with the department to secure your in-person testimony beginning in March. When you would not appear in May, we honored your request to appear in June, using a date, June 7, that was offered by your staff and to which you agreed. We have been more than accommodating to establish a mutual date for this meeting, for this hearing. So why is it that on late Friday evening, following the committee's public posting of the hearing a week ago, your staff told us that you were, quote, no longer able to make June 7th work? What was so important that you were willing to stop the work of a congressional committee, upend the schedule of 45 members of Congress, and leave the American people's concerns unanswered? The hearing is not about you or your pending nomination. It is about assessing the budget proposal for the Department of Labor and the department's performance and adherence to its statutory mandate. However, your effort to evade transparency at the 11th hour calls into question your ability to fulfill your duty as a potential Secretary of Labor. Acting Secretary Sue, you're sitting here today only because I informed you that I would issue a subpoena to compel your attendance at this previously agreed to hearing, and you reconsidered your cancellation. I'm glad that you reconsidered that lapse in judgment. I'm unaware of this committee ever needing to consider such action for a department's annual hearing until now. You cannot run from this responsibility. Congress and the American people have questions about how you've been running the department. Overall, Biden's FY 2024 budget calls for $1.5 billion more in discretionary spending for the Department of Labor than it received last year. Considering your continued unwillingness to provide fully responsive answers to committee oversight requests, this budget increase can only be seen as a tacit nod of approval by the President that the department can continue skirting accountability to taxpayers. If enacted, the budget would add 2,000 new federal bureaucrats. If the current 17,000 can't sufficiently respond to a single committee request, I don't think adding 2,000 more will help the department's bureaucratic sclerosis. If anything, more bureaucrats will mean more mounds of paperwork and more red tape under which to bury our oversight request. Worse, this paperwork and red tape will bury workers and businesses trying to make a living. We should be shrinking, not expanding the size of the federal government. Nevertheless, after years of conducting oversight, I've found that no amount of bureaucratic red tape can obfuscate an objectively poor record. When the record speaks for itself, its inherent contradictions, its complications, and its confusions will naturally resolve to clarity. We're here to talk about your department's record, Acting Secretary Sue, and it doesn't hold up well. The department's rap sheet is long. It includes over 100 planned rulemakings and long-term actions. From his first day in office, Biden reversed many Trump administration policies that would have promoted hiring and employment opportunities, and he began pursuing radical policies that would expand the size and scope of government and pay back big labor. The Biden administration has amassed a troubling record of big labor bias at the expense of American workers. This culture of union favoritism undermines workers' rights. Washington should not be in the business of picking winners and losers in our economy, but that's exactly what the Biden administration is doing, whether it be through attempting to overturn every right-to-work law in the country, eliminating independent contracting, jeopardizing franchise businesses, or rewarding union bosses with unchecked power by acquiescing to every item on their wish list. The PRO Act is but one example of the administration's union favoritism. It is championed by the AFL-CIO, big labor groups, Socialist Bernie Sanders, and now the Department of Labor. Due to legislative gridlock, the department is trying to bypass congressional authority by implementing the PRO Act's key features in pieces through regulation. If enacted, it would destroy the livelihoods of millions of workers, including independent contractors who overwhelmingly prefer their current worker status. President Biden's anti-worker agenda is hurting our economy. We watched its impact on our workforce during COVID. Acting Secretary Sue, while you were Deputy Secretary, the department imposed a tyrannical, illegal vaccine mandate on employers. The rule applied to nearly 84 million in our workforce. Not only was the department wrong on the science of COVID, but it also compromised our economic supply chain because of its sweeping dictates. America needs a Department of Labor aligned with its priorities, like filling the more than 10 million open jobs in the United States. Yet every action the department takes does one of two things. At best, it pushes a misguided union agenda. At worst, it subverts our economic stability and prosperity to do so. As I reviewed the FY 2024 budget request, I saw more of the same. In it, the administration requested $81 million more for the Wage and Hour Division, WHD. This is currently a $310 million federal office responsible for enforcing several important workforce laws, and the American people would be incensed if they knew just how badly it is run. Under your supervision, the number of workers receiving back wages is the lowest on record for WHD, down by more than 51% from 4 years ago. Over those 4 years, the WHD has received a 10% bump in funding, yet it has achieved half the result. The taxpayers are not giving a blank check for the department's ineptitude, and WHD does not deserve a dollar more. Acting Secretary Sue, I could spend all day going line by line through this budget. There are places where we agree, like expanding apprenticeship programs, but even here, I think the department comes up short. Instead of making the workforce system more responsive to employer needs, the Biden administration has doubled down on burdensome registered apprenticeships while shuttering the industry-recognized apprenticeship program. It's hard to think of a worse response to our worker shortage. At heart, we disagree on guiding principles and how we envision the government's role in our workforce. The government itself is not a job creator. The administration and the near 100 planned workforce rules don't foster economic growth. The proper role of the department is certainly not to enforce universal unionization. Rather, we should promote job creation by removing the government as much as possible from the equation. Yes, that means subtracting from and not adding billions to your budget. With that, I look forward to the hearing today and yield to the ranking member for an opening statement.
Thank you, Dr. Fox, and Acting Secretary Sue, good morning, and thank you for being with us. You're here with us now, and we have had problems getting previous administration officials to the committee, but thank you for being with us today. We have an opportunity to discuss the work of President Biden and Acting Secretary Sue and what they've done for workers, businesses, and our economy, as well as investments we must continue to make. Committee Democrats and I strongly support Ms. Sue's nomination to be Secretary of Labor because she represents the best of America. She's the daughter of immigrants who owned a small laundromat and a franchise pizza restaurant and became the first in her family to attend law school. But we support Acting Secretary Sue's nomination not just because of who she is, but for what she has done. Throughout her service as California Labor Commissioner, Secretary of the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency, Deputy Secretary of Labor, she is a committed public servant who has dedicated her career to supporting workers and families. Thanks to her and President Biden's leadership and the responsible actions taken by Democrats in the last Congress, unemployment rates remain near historic lows. Our job market is continuing to grow, and workers are seeing higher wages. Since taking office, the Biden administration has created more than 13 million jobs. That's more jobs created in 28 months than any previous president has created in a single 48-month term. According to the White House, the last time we had such a long stretch of low unemployment was in the 1960s. The share of working-age Americans in the workforce is at its highest level in 16 years, and that's the record. I also want to remind my colleagues that every Democratic administration since the Kennedy administration has left for their Republican successors a better deficit situation than the one they inherited. And every Republican administration since Nixon has left for their Democratic successors a worse deficit situation than the one they inherited, without exception, and President Biden is continuing this trend as he creates record numbers of jobs. So the evidence is clear that President Biden's economic agenda is working. This means that my Republican colleagues have had to resort to baseless claims and desperate attacks to oppose Ms. Sue's nomination. There's an old saying amongst lawyers that if you have the law on your side, pound the law. If not, but you have the facts on your side, pound the facts. But if you have neither the law nor the facts, pound the table. Julie Sue is an impeccably qualified candidate to serve as Secretary of Labor, and she has been integral to our sustained economic recovery. So get ready for people to be pounding the table. Committee Republicans may talk about unemployment insurance fraud in California. This is not Ms. Sue's doing. In fact, under her leadership, California implemented additional safeguards that helped prevent UI fraud and stopped an estimated tens of billions of dollars in fraudulent payments. They may talk about independent contractors and the Labor Department's proposed rule, but do not be confused by Republican attempts to conflate California's state law with federal regulation. The proposed regulation does not implement California's AB 5, which adopts what's known as the ABC test. In fact, the Biden administration clearly noted that it is legally constrained from adopting the ABC test, so this line of attack on Ms. Sue doesn't hold up either. Committee Republicans may talk about child labor, but Ms. Sue is certainly not among the Republican state legislators who are working to roll back child labor protections. Unfortunately, we can expect Republicans on the committee to pound the table this morning since they have no substantive criticism of Ms. Sue's record in the Department of Labor. In contrast, committee Democrats remain focused on concrete solutions to put money back into workers' pockets, keep workers healthy and safe on the job, and ensure all workers can enjoy a dignified retirement. I hope my Republican colleagues will put politics aside and work with us to deliver on these priorities. So thank you, Ms. Sue, for your leadership and for joining us today. I hope we will remain focused on what is most important, improving the lives of workers and their families. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Pursuant to Committee Rule 8C, all members who wish to insert written statements into the record may do so by submitting them to the committee clerk electronically in Microsoft Word format by 5 p.m., 14 days after the date of this hearing, which is June 21, 2023. And without objection, the hearing record will remain open for 14 days to allow such statements and other extraneous material referenced during the hearing to be submitted for the official hearing record. I now turn to the introduction of our distinguished witness and thank her for being here. We have before us today the Honorable Julie A. Sue, Acting Secretary, U.S. Department of Labor.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fox, Ranking Member Scott, and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to testify today. I am pleased to appear before this committee to highlight the Department of Labor's fiscal year 2024 budget request. An investment in the Department of Labor is an investment in our workers and the future of our country. Through this budget, we can build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out. I recognize that Congress will be working under statutory budget caps for FY 2024, and I look forward to working with you to ensure that these priorities are reflected in the final bill. The American dream, that if you work hard, you can make it, has always been premised on having a good job. That's why this budget is fundamentally about investments in people, about what a good job does for an individual, a family, and a community. No worker should be injured or killed at work. The budget request will allow the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, to improve workplace safety and health and be better able to help employers comply with the law. The budget request for the Mine Safety and Health Administration includes an increase to enable MSHA to strengthen its efforts to reduce accidents, injuries, illnesses, and fatalities. The department's request includes funding for the Employment and Training Administration to build on the progress, restoring and growing the economy following the pandemic. These resources will create pathways into the high-quality jobs created by the landmark Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, CHIPS and Science Act, and Inflation Reduction Act, and other historic investments in our nation's infrastructure, energy sectors, and manufacturing. Investments in evidence-based workforce development models will help states and local areas meet the workforce needs of their communities and the needs of industries across the country. Specifically, the budget continues support for the Registered Apprenticeship Program, in line with the President's goal to serve at least 1 million apprentices annually within 10 years. The budget request proposes a sectoral employment through career training for occupational readiness program to support the development and expansion of partnerships between employers, education and workforce development providers, and community-based groups. The department proposes additional resources for the Veterans Employment and Training Service to support a legislative proposal that expands anti-discrimination and reemployment protections to military spouses. Military spouses sacrifice daily to support their families and our country, and the administration is proposing we do more to ensure that they are able to enjoy the economic security that they deserve. Protecting workers' hard-earned pensions and health benefits is a priority for the department. The budget request for the Employee Benefits Security Administration includes an increase to continue its important work expanding access to care for mental health and substance use disorders at a time when so many Americans are living with these conditions. The agency's request includes an increase for the Missing Participants Program, as well as establishment of a retirement savings lost and found, required by the recently enacted Secure 2.0 to help reconnect retirees with the benefits they have earned. These investments will make a real difference for retired and elderly people. Working together, we can create an economy built around the dignity and value of all work and workers. I thank you for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to discussing the department's FY 2024 budget request with you and all members of the committee, and I'm happy to respond to any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sue. I will recognize myself for 5 minutes. Ms. Sue, I take my duty to conduct oversight very seriously. Unfortunately, Secretary Walsh did not take his obligation to respond to oversight seriously. During your short tenure, your track record appears to be about the same as his, at least until you attempted to cancel your appearance at the last minute and are here today only because my threat to issue a subpoena caused you to reconsider appearing. In most cases, you've responded to the committee's inquiries with a vague letter providing none of the requested documents, thereby technically responding to the inquiry, but not, in fact, coming close. Will you commit to providing fully responsive answers to the committee's request? Yes or no?
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Fox. I am very happy to be here today to testify. I understand that our teams worked together to
Ms. Sue,
find the date.
Yeah, I just need a yes or no answer, and I appreciate your being here. And you don't have to say thank you very much for the question. That just takes up time.
I appreciate that. Chairwoman Fox, I want to say that I take the oversight role of this committee and of Congress very seriously.
Then you'll be saying yes to my question. Yes, you will answer our request completely. Is that right?
Chairwoman Fox, my team understands that it is our job and it is my request that we respond to oversight requests and work with your team to make sure you get what you need. Do you understand
that failure to provide complete responses can result in the committee taking compulsory measures?
Yes.
Good. You know that word. Ms. Sue, in March, my staff requested performance information on DOL's workforce development grant programs. The department's had over 2 months, yet the information that has been provided to date is incomplete and lacks employment and earnings outcomes for a significant number of grantees. How can your department effectively manage discretionary grant programs if you're not tracking grantee performances?
Thank you, Chairwoman Fox. It is very important, as you say, to track outcomes, to make sure that we are good stewards of federal monies.
Okay, then my request should be very simple. Just hit click and send what you've got. Can you commit to providing performance information on all of ETA's discretionary grants by the end of the week?
Chairwoman Fox, it is my understanding that we have been responsive to requests from you and from this committee. If that is not the case,
well,
yes,
let me just tell you directly, your department has not been responsive. So please review our request and respond appropriately. Going forward, will you commit to posting the employment and earnings outcomes for grant programs on the department's website?
Chairwoman Fox, I'm not clear specifically on the details of what you request, but we have worked to be transparent about our grants and also about outcomes, and I agree with you that it's very important to make sure that what we're funding works.
If the letters are not clear, and I read those letters very, very carefully, as do our staff members, to make sure they're clear. But if you would simply send a response back and tell us what's not clear, we'll certainly clarify it. But we do think the letters are very clear and that the information we need is very specific. So let me switch to the wage and hour division briefly. Despite the wage and hours division nearly 10% increase in funding over the last 4 years, it collected the least amount of back wages for workers since FY 2010, down by nearly 33% from 4 years ago. The number of workers receiving back wages is the lowest on record for WHD. As I said, down by more than 51% from 4 years ago. These results are not due to a resource issue, and COVID is no longer a legitimate excuse. These failures reflect the management problem. What are you doing as a manager to fix this poor performance?
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Fox. As the Deputy Secretary of Labor, over the last 2 years, I have I had responsibility for management of the department and worked closely with the Wage and Hour Division to make sure that we
Yes,
were
we already know
performing
that.
our mission.
We already know that. So what's the solution?
So one of the things that that when we came in January of 2021, the department, their enforcement resources had been cut dramatically in the prior administration, about 14%. And we have, in the time that we have been here, worked to rebuild the division, to train staff, and to make sure that we are investigating not all workplaces, right? It makes sense to be targeted and to be smart and to identify which employers are actually engaged in violations and which are not, right? The vast majority of employers are
Ms.
complying
Sue,
with the law.
You have effectively taken up a lot of my time with without answering questions. So I will now yield back